Good afternoon, folks. Hey, thank you very much for coming down to studios today. Hey, I want to welcome Mr. David Corson out of here with a commercial construction renovation magazine. Hey, let's give you a nice warm round of applause for Mr. David Corson. All right, super job. Thank you.
How's everybody going out there in person as well as out there on the web? We appreciate you finding us. Hopefully the link worked and you're in there. You know, I had our keynote on our cover and we became friends. And actually, I didn't even know her. I knew the stations. I knew Stuckey's. I've been in several of them over, all over the country in my traveling days. And anyway, I was like, this is an awesome story. Would you be my keynote? So we went back and forth and we figured out how, schedule was open. So I thought that, rebuilding the brand, especially with today, and she's got a great story, history, some awesome photos that I think you're going to thoroughly enjoy her presentation. And then we'll do a little Q&A and I'll come back on stage. And if anybody has any questions that you would like to ask her or comments, etc., think about it, after a presentation. So with that said, let's give a big round of applause for Miss Stephanie Stuckey from Stuckey's Corp. Pecan rolls, all that.
Thank you, David. It's my pleasure.
Thank you.
So before I really get started with my formal remarks, I have to say I eavesdropped a little bit on your conversations during lunch, and I want to comment on something I heard. And I'm going to kick this off with a very controversial topic. How do you pronounce Pecan? I overheard you. So I don't know if anyone online wants to comment on that. Do you say Pecan or Puchcan? So if we can just have a show of hands here. How many people say pecan? Yes. And how many people say pecan? All right, that's about the average response for Americans. There was actually, if you can believe it, a survey conducted. Somebody paid to find out what Americans say. 70% of Americans say pecan. So you were in the majority. You can give yourself a pat on the back. I happen to be from South Georgia, so I say pecan. I have heard every joke imaginable about pecan. I will not repeat that today, but I will close out what I think is a very contentious debate with what my grandfather said. He said, they are pecans when you pick them, because he was from South Georgia, but they're pecans when you sell them. It's a very important lesson. I think most of us are in business. You want to cater to your customer, and the customer is always right. Most of his customers said pecan, so he said pecan. He also once joked, it depends on the price. The higher the price, he would say pecan. So I'm going to talk for about 10, 15 minutes, and then David will join me. We're going to have a bit of a fireside chat. So those of you joining remotely, please post some questions, be thinking about what you want us to discuss. My topic is the art of rebuilding your brand. And I'm just curious, how many folks here have had to rebuild your company, do a career pivot, have anything that involved reinvention in your career? Anything? Okay, so you can relate to this. So this is my personal experience. 3 years ago, this is what I was doing. I was head of sustainability for the city of Atlanta. I'd had a 30-year career in environmental advocacy. I had been an environmental attorney. I'd been a state representative. The entire time I was advancing environmental causes. Then I was head of sustainability for the city of Atlanta. Then I joined a nonprofit where I was head of their sustainability division. I spent my world, frankly, hanging out in coffee shops, drinking oat milk lattes, wearing Birkenstocks, talking with all my friends in our green bubble about saving the world from climate change. And I thought that was my career. I was in my 50s, so I was pretty well set for life. And then I had the completely unexpected opportunity to buy my family's business, Stuckey's. And I went from this to this. And those of you who are familiar with our brand, some of you may not be, so I'll give you a quick, I'm going to go briefly into the history to cue up the discussion, but we're known as a roadside chain that sells pecan log rolls, candies, kitschy souvenirs. We have ashtrays shaped like toilets that say, put your butts here. shell, wind chimes, rubber alligators, coonskin caps. So it's sort of kitschy Americana. And it was something my grandfather founded. We've been around for decades. So we're almost synonymous with roadside kitschy America. So I traded in all my environmental advocacy to promote a roadside brand for gas guzzling tourists. Quite a change. And people often ask me, why did I make this career switch? The initial answer is very simple. It was for sale. I literally got a phone call one day from the last company that owned Stuckey's, which included my father as one of the investors at that point. And they said, well, would you like to buy Stuckey's? And I was very flattered because I didn't think they thought of me as someone who could own and run a company. They frankly referred to me as the eco-wacko tree hugger. But I was very flattered, so I called the other grandchildren of my grandfather, the other heirs to the Stuckey, what was left of Stuckey's at that point, and I asked, would any of them go in on this with me? Well, it turned out that they had all been approached before me. I was number 7. I'm number 5 of 7 grandchildren. Even the ones younger than me had been approached. They had all turned it down. So I decided it was kind of a crazy venture, but here's the other reason why I bought Stuckey's. It was for sale, but also I loved my grandfather. And I wanted to see if we could revive his brand. And I remember when I made this decision, I wrote out a little press release. I didn't have a press secretary. I still don't 3 years later. But I did a press release, and it got picked up in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And I love the headline, Heiress Drives Family Legacy, Stuckey's on the Road to Revival. I don't know about you, but when I think of heiress, I think Paris Hilton. I think maybe the Kardashians. I think of people who actually inherited something of value. I bought Stuckey's, and we were 6 figures in the red. I remember looking at that financial report. This is how little I knew about running a company. I remember being encouraged because there were 6 figures on the bottom line, and it was like $600-something thousand. And I showed it to a friend to help me figure out valuation of the company, and he said, there's parentheses around that number, Stephanie. That means you're operating at a deficit. And then he said, well, what's your EBITDA? I thought EBITDA was the Swedish rock band. I'd never heard of EBITDA. I had to Google that, figured out the valuation. It wasn't that good. Came upon a price. I bought it. So what we had, in addition to 6 figures in the red, there were 13 original Stuckey stores that were still standing. We didn't own any of them, but they paid us a licensing fee. And we had a dusty warehouse in Eastman, Georgia. That was a distribution center. All of our product was outsourced, but we would distribute stuff to those 13 stores. Really was not a working model. So this is me, my first week, surveying my fortune at that warehouse in Eastman, Georgia, my hometown. And among the dusty merchandise, there were 6 cases of Britney Spears t-shirts. Thank God she made a comeback. I was able to sell all of that at a profit eventually. But I show this to say I had to figure out how to reinvent our brand in order to become profitable and survive. That's the absolute necessity, but also really to create something of lasting value. So I want to give you a little history of what brought our company to such a low point, and then how we've been able to turn things around. And we're still turning things around. Revival doesn't happen like that, right? So this is the way our stores looked in our heyday. Some of you may remember them. We had these sloped turquoise roofs. At our peak, there were 368 Stuckey stores in 40 states. We were on every major highway. We had a candy company. We had a trucking company. We had a billboard company. We had 4,000 signs all over the interstates. We were as populous, or our signs populated the interstate as much as Burma Shave or south of the border, all of those companies that just sort of dominated the highway back in the day. We were part of that era, synonymous with the road trip. And this is what we became over the years. There's actually about a dozen old Stuckey's that are now porn shops and strip clubs for truckers. Very conveniently located on the side of the road. So when people say, why did you sink your life savings at age 53 into buying a failing company? This is really the number one reason. How would you like it if that was your family's legacy? I did not want that to be how our story ended. So here's how we began. My grandfather started Stuckey's during the Great Depression, 1937, as a side hustle. Anyone who has a side hustle, I applaud you. Your side hustle may become your hustle. And that's what my grandfather did. He was farming cotton. He hated it. He had to drop out of the University of Georgia because he couldn't afford it. And he started selling pecans because it was a bumper crop year. Some of you may know this. Georgia's the #1 state for pecan production. We produce 1/3 of the global supply of pecans, and over 80% of pecans are produced in the US. It's the only snack nut native to our country. So we happen to be in ground zero for pecans. And so he started selling something that was plentiful. And then he realized he could make a value-add product with the candies that my grandmother made. And she created the pecan log roll, to this day, our best-selling item. And after a few years, he was profitable enough to start a Stuckey store. And like every good entrepreneur, he realized you need to solve a problem that people have if you're going to be successful in business. And the problem people had back then is there was no reliable place to pull over and get gas, have a clean restroom, get a cold glass of water or drink, get a quick snack, and while you're at it, some candy that he made and some kitschy souvenirs. So he created all this, and it really was the world's first, or the country's first, roadside retail chain. Before there was Wawa or TA or Pilot or Buc-ee's, there was Stuckey's. And that's what we became. By the 1970s, we really were part of this whole generation of people. Some of you look like you're about my age, and you grew up in the 70s. I was that kid in the back of the Woody station wagon doing this to get the truckers to honk. This was how we traveled. We didn't think anything of getting in the car and the whole family hauling for 3 days to Florida to go to Disney World. That's how we vacationed in America in that era, and Stuckey's was part of it. And that just shows where his stores were. He had them all over the place. He grew from that one store to hundreds. And then he had to learn how to reinvent himself. So I'm going to give you the most important lesson I learned from my grandfather. When I bought the company, like I said, we were in debt. I had almost nothing of value. The thing I got of value was the trademark. I got the name, which I still think had some value. There were memories of generations of people who'd stopped at our stores and had good experiences. The other thing I got, which is very interesting, I got 6 boxes of his archives. So every night as I was struggling to rebuild his brand, and by the way, there was a pandemic that hit, so I was grappling with a lot, but every night I would go through his papers and learn how he built his company. And that was my MBA. Even though I didn't have formal training, I read his story and learned how he did it. And I learned that when the interstate highway system came along in 1956, President Eisenhower, sounds great, right? Those of you who are in supply chain know the importance of being able to move goods rapidly across America. And that's thanks to Eisenhower building this system. Well, there was one problem with the interstate highway system, is that, well, I'm going to go back here first, is that it bypassed the Jefferson Highway, the Lincoln Highway, the Dixie Highway, Route 66, all the places where my grandfather had built his stores. So there were hundreds and hundreds of businesses like Stuckey's, like the Wigwam Village. If you've ever slept in a wigwam, those motels are on these old roads, on the diners shaped like coffee pots that were part of Roadside America. They all were being bypassed in favor of the interstate. So my grandfather had to make a decision. Was he going to stay and try to survive on these back roads? Or was he going to accept the reality of what was happening to him and try to grow in a different way? And what I learned is he didn't just accept change. That's not enough. You have to embrace change and say, this is here. This may seem like a crisis, but it could be an amazing opportunity for growth. So not only did he move his stores to the interstate highway and shuttered the ones that were on the back roads. Now I'm ready for this slide. He embraced it. I love this postcard I found in his archives, traveling on beautiful Interstate 70. I don't know if any of you have been on Interstate 70. I have. Beautiful is not an adjective that comes to mind. Or for any of the interstates, 95, 85, 40, 20, he was building all along the interstates across America. And he embraced it and he said, you know what, I think these interstates are beautiful, or at least what he was offering was beautiful. He realized there was an opportunity. Here's this blah, mundane, ho-hum experience of driving on the monotonous highway. I can create something fun and interesting on the exits. And since he was the first to get out there on the interstate, he was able to buy up land. Those of you in the construction industry can definitely appreciate this, at low value. He used to have people who were hired to do nothing but attend state Department of Transportation meetings. Super riveting and exciting, right? But they learned where the exits were going. And he would immediately dispatch his people and they go out and they would buy the land. And then he had this whole construction company that he worked with, and he came up with this beautiful, consistent design before his stores had all looked like whatever he was. Sound just went. Okay. And then when the interstate came along, he used as an opportunity to rebuild in a stronger, better way. He came up with a consistent design that was branding, but he also created a unique experience. So every time you pulled over at a Stuckey's, if you were in Oklahoma, you would get souvenirs that were specific to that location, a lot of Native American souvenirs and handmade art and folk stuff. And if you were in Florida, you would get oranges and coconut heads and seashell statues. So he had a sense of place and belonging and specialness, even on the interstate. So that's an example that I learned from him, that when you have change and hard times, embrace it and figure out what's a lesson that I should be learning here so I can be stronger. Here is the other thing I learned from him that I think every business needs, and then I'll move on to what happened to make our business fall. Throughout his papers, I found this saying, every traveler is a friend. And I even saw it framed. And my father told me that that was on his desk. And that really was not only how he ran his company, but how he lived his life. He wanted everyone who pulled over at a Stuckey's to feel like we were a welcoming, safe oasis where you were treated like you belonged. And the best example of how he lived that was, if you've seen the movie The Green Book, we're in The Green Book. The Green Book is about African Americans traveling during the Jim Crow era, when most places were not open to them. They were whites only. And Stuckey's was in the movie The Green Book because we were never segregated. So I think that example shows more than anything. And I didn't know that till I started reading his papers. It was just something that he quietly did. He did the right thing, and he treated everyone who came in contact with our stores or with our brand as a friend. And having values that underlie everything you do, that is why I think our brand was able to survive despite decades of terrible downfall. If you have these values, your brand is going to live on. So this is what happened to us. It was a trifecta of really bad crap. He sold the company to Pet Dairy Corporation. He sold Stuckey's. He made a lot of money. It was a voluntary decision. He was getting older. Pet seemed like they could help him grow. It all seemed really wonderful for a while. And then he was involved with Stuckey's at Pet. Then he got ousted. And then he died. My grandfather died. Then we had the Arab oil embargo. Gas became expensive. Nobody was traveling by car. It cost too much. And then there were changes in federal laws related to airlines. So airline travel, domestic travel became affordable by air. So people weren't driving anymore, and the road trip era was gone, and Stuckey's was kind of gone. We got the company back 1985. I won't go into all the details, but my father was able to reacquire the company. He paired it with Dairy Queen stores. He had the franchise rights to Dairy Queens on the interstate highway system, so that enabled him to revive Stuckey's as part of Dairy Queen. But then my father sold Dairy Queen to Warren Buffett. Good deal for him. I was really disappointed that the Oracle of Omaha was not interested in buying the Stuckey's portion of his business. So Stuckey's was left on its own for over a decade. And that's the point when it just started to falter. And I had the unexpected opportunity to buy it. So there I am again, go dogs, my first week on the job. That's just some of the many souvenirs and stuff we found in the background. By the way, all that dusty merchandise that I found in our stores, I decided I was going to be inspired by my grandfather, embrace that I've got this situation. So I put all the merchandise in these sort of mix and match boxes I called mystery boxes. I didn't tell anyone what was in them. You're just going to get a surprise. I sold them online for $24.99. We sold week. And overall, we made almost $50,000 off the mystery boxes, off of inventory that was valued at less than $10,000. So that's putting into action how you embrace change. And the other thing I did was I realized I had to rebuild and I had to pivot how we made money because we didn't own the stores. We didn't operate the stores. It was not working. That business model was not working. So I got a business partner who's a pecan farmer. We joined forces and together we got an SBA loan and we bought a manufacturing facility. So we are now making candy and pecan snacks ourselves. And because of that, within less than a year, we started turning a profit. We went from a debt to a profit. We're still getting our final numbers, but I think we'll end. The first year I bought the company, we had a little over 2 million in gross sales, and we should close out this year over 15 million gross 3 years later. So yes, please applaud that. So the strategy's working. And I'll wrap it up just saying some of the key takeaways. Design really does matter. Branding matters, how you present yourself. And one of the most important things I did was redesign all of our packaging. And I think especially your logo is an outward appearance of an interchange. So we went back to the original logo. That's my grandfather's signature. I especially love the cross and the T because it looks like a trumpet blaring. We're back. And I love just the overall design. Clearly the one on the left, the brown one, that is the original packaging when I bought the company. I don't know about you, but I think that looks like dog vomit. I'm being generous. So we tried to make the product look fresher. We tried to make it look like something you would actually want to eat. Bless you. And then I decided, what is our brand really about? So maybe we don't own and operate any stores, and there's only 13 of those still left, but we're still about the road trip. We can still be a welcoming, friendly brand that people connect with on an emotional level. So I started telling the story of Stuckey's, the story of the road trip, and how important it is to revive what's special about the road trip, which to me is the freedom that a road trip represents, being able to go in your car and choose where you drive and where you pull over and what snacks you take. Hopefully those are Stuckey snacks, what tunes you listen to. And in an era, especially during COVID, where so many outside forces are controlling our lives, just to have that sense of freedom and fun, that's what the road trip represented to me. And so I started writing about that and sharing stories. And that's really been the key to our comeback, is the branding and the storytelling around what is the DNA of our company. It's the road trip. And it's working. This is totally organically. We got on the front page of the New York Times business section, July 22nd, 2022, this past July. I, of course, have memorized that date. But it was a huge boost for us. Our sales skyrocketed when that article hit. And that's just to show if you're consistently out there branding, it can work and people will pick it up. So this is my last slide. I like it because it's a photograph of my grandfather and it shows how meticulous he was, paying attention to detail. He really did go into all of his stores and he looked at the displays and made sure they looked right. I also like this photo because it shows what a snappy dresser he was. Look at those shoes. And then there I am in front of one of our displays. This is one of the 5,000 retail outlets across the country that is now carrying our product. And so it's showing how we're rebuilding the brand. And I like to say I'm respecting our past and our history, but I don't live in it. So I'm going to close with that. Here's how you can reach me. And then, David, you can come up and join me. We'll have a chat. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie. One more applause. Come on, come on. That was loud enough. Good job.
Thank you. And thank you for listening.
So my family's been in construction since 1888. So I can understand we're fifth generation, and my cousins are running it right now. I could have gone into it, but I did my time when I graduated high school, or I grew up outside of Philly. So all the grandsons, when you got your driver's license at 16, you had to go into the scrapyard. So I grew up kind of just like you did, in the warehouse and looking, and just, so I was always down there. But when I got my license, all the grandsons had to go in the scrapyard. So I shoveled asbestos, I laid railroad tracks. We were in demolition. And that's what we do. So looking at all those pictures, I can remember being in the station wagon, going down the highway, and there's the gas station. How many of you guys had station wagons when you grew up? Oh yeah. So, it's an amazing thing. But what really hit me, and I didn't really realize that the airline embargo, or, airline traveling by air.
The Arab embargo and the Airline Deregulation Act both happened back to back. It was in the late 70s, early 80s. So it was just the combination helped destroy the road trip. Can I just add, anyone who learned to drive in a station wagon, I think that officially qualifies you to be a badass for life. If you can parallel park a station wagon, come on, you can walk this world and fear no one.
She just had that on. She had that picture of the station wagon the other day on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And she was talking about parallel parking. And I took my test. My first test, I failed it. I took it in my grandmother's caddy, and I got flustered. And then the next week, my mom took me to this little podunk in Westchester County, and I passed my test. And I think I took that in the big caddy. But it was like, learn how to parallel park. You had to learn how to drive stick. People today, they don't even know what a stick shift is. It's amazing. And but that picture of the parallel parking, I was laughing the other day when I saw that.
Well, it also shows just how our life's experiences can inform what we do in business. It doesn't have to be related specifically to running a corporation. It can be, I know how to parallel park, or I know how to drive a stick shift. We take all of that with us.
The first thing that when my son got his license here in Georgia, they get him 15. He's down here. Is we went in the parking lot, got him in the RX-8, and he was stalling. I said, look, you are going to be one of the only persons that will, your friends, that will be able to drive stick. And sure enough, when he went to North Gwinnett, and all his friends, they didn't know how to drive stick. And it's an amazing thing of how technology, now everything's paddles and so forth. But my thing was, first thing I said, look, if you're going to get your license, you got to be able to drive stick, because if you want to drive any of these cars in the garage, they're all stick. So you might as well learn how to do it. You're going to learn how to change a tire. You're going to learn how to change the oil. You're going to learn how to do all of those things that, that they taught you in shop class, which they don't do these days. But looking back, we want to bring all that back. And I think heritage is so important in a brand. On my father's side, we were the largest privately owned manufacturer in upholstery. And we had the insignia, and I grew up in in the showrooms, and but your story, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Family owned, pride, selling it out, and then you didn't have to come back.
Yeah, I think that's the interesting thing about our story, is that most family businesses, there's this continuity, and we have this huge gap. We have a 20+ year gap when it was out of the family. And then frankly, before I bought it back, there was a 10-year gap when my father and his friends, his business associates, basically checked out and left 2 people running it on autopilot. Mm-hmm. So there have been these gaps throughout our history. And so I like that part of the story, that we got it back. And I'd like to be able to tell other family businesses out there who've sold their company and wish they hadn't, maybe you can get it back.
Yeah. Are there any questions out there that anybody, we have a mic that's ready, so just raise your, okay. So any questions out there? There you go. Oh, raise your hand and we'll give you the mic. There you go.
Also, if you're online, right, ask a question.
When you were rebranding, what would you say was your biggest challenge in getting back into it? And your question of what was it that said, yes, that this is what I'm going to do, seeing that you were in the red?
Yeah, I think the most important thing we did, and I will say I did have a secret weapon. I I did a lot of research online on branding and marketing because I couldn't afford a marketing firm. It was really out of necessity that I had to teach myself how to do this. And I stumbled upon a book on word of mouth marketing. How many of y'all are familiar with? I mean, I know you can probably figure out it's word of mouth, but there's a lot more to it. But there's a book I read called Fizz Marketing, and it was a how to, almost a DIY guide to marketing, word of mouth. And the whole idea is that you want to get your message about your product, your company, out in a way that's going to spark conversation between people who matter to what you do. And you want them to then turn around and be your ambassadors and talk about your brand. It is the cheapest form of advertising because it's just people talking about your brand, but it's also the hardest form of advertising because you've got to figure out who are these people and how do I communicate to them about what we're doing. But it's the most effective. So I read this book and I was very inspired by it. And the author of the book is a man named Ted Wright from Decatur, Georgia, and he runs a firm called Fizz Marketing. And I kind of stalked him, cyber stalked him, and sent him messages on LinkedIn and said, I really love your book. I'm a fangirl. And then he did some live video chat, and I was messaging him live on the video, and I'm sure he thought I was getting to be stalker phase there. But he finally got back to me and said, okay, I'll have lunch with you. And that lunch lasted 3 hours and we had a lot in common. Turns out he knew the brand. He's my age. He grew up stopping at Stuckey's. And long story short, I got him on my board. I remember he said, I don't want to be on your board just to give you free marketing advice. And I said, well, I'm kind of asking you to be on the board to give me free marketing advice. So I was brutally honest about it. He did agree. And now he is a co-investor. So it's me and my business partner, RG, and Ted. So he has some equity ownership in Stuckey's. So Ted really helped me figure out, in order to brand, you have to know what is your brand essence? What does your brand stand for? If you've ever watched the Simon Sinek TED Talk, and if you haven't, you should watch it, on Know Your Why. And basically what Simon Sinek says is, we all know or should know what we do, right? We make widgets, we sell pecan log rolls, whatever it is, you build commercial buildings. You know your what. Most of you know the how you go about doing it. But why? Why are you doing it? And it can't be, I'm doing it to make money. That can't be your why. That why is everyone's trying to make money or build a profit. So you really have to sort of dig down into what is our brand really about. So we locked ourselves in a room, sort of our core team members. So we were about 12 of us. And it was like that movie, if you see 12 Angry Men, where everyone, like at the beginning, everyone's disagreeing. By the end, you're all together. So we had this fierce debate. Our why is we're about the pecan. And I'm like, no, we're about the road trip. We're about the pecan, we're about the road. So we were arguing and finally came down to, well, what can you tell a story about? And what's going to connect you with other people? And what's going to connect you with the people who matter, who are going to tell other people about how great your brand is? And it's the road trip. So you figure out what that why is, and then you talk about that, and that will bring on other people. And then the sales started happening. I post every day on social media, and I would say maybe one post out of 30 is actual sales. I posted this week because we've got a sale online. But most of the posts aren't asking people to buy anything. It's telling a story. And people connect with your story, and then they want to connect with you and your business and what you do. So I would recommend getting the people who matter in your business in a room and saying, what's our why? And really, really delve into that. And then once you've got the why, how can you tell a story about that? And who are we trying to influence to have them tell others how great the brand is? Yeah.
Yeah, my question was, because I see you on social media, so I went to a digital boot camp the last, probably, I don't know, 3 months, 12-week program. I thought I knew a lot of stuff. I'm a digital guy. So, but I didn't. And the biggest thing was, it was mindset. That was the thing that they were trying to teach you. You know, get rid of the negative people around you. They're not worth it. But your mindset has to be positive. You have to believe in yourself. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to learn from them. But how did you just say, just going to do all this? Because I see you every day posting stuff, and you're not selling anything. You're just kind of building your image. So how did you go about that? You know, as far as, did you know Pinterest and Instagram and all that, or did you just have to learn it yourself?
So there's this great trick, tip that I'll let you in on how you can figure all that stuff out. YouTube.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
I just watch YouTube videos. How to post on Pinterest is the hardest for me. I'll be honest. I'm pretty spotty on Pinterest, but the others, including TikTok, I'm now on TikTok. I watch a lot of YouTube how-to videos, and there's an incredible amount of resources out there that are free that tell you the basic logistics of it and figuring out the algorithms. Like TikTok, for example, a lot of people are going on TikTok of all ages. I did a trade show 2 weeks ago, and I got 2 sales, pretty big accounts. They came right to our booth and they said, I saw your TikTok video, and I'd made a little video in the booth. I was bored in the booth between people coming by. And they said, we saw your video and we're going to buy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And these are not 20-year-olds. You know, I'm not doing dances to the most popular tunes. So just so you know, like, you can be yourself. You don't have to be what you think you're supposed to be on these different social media platforms. But also understand the algorithms and how they work. On Instagram, if you do reels, they're going to bump you up in the feed. So there's certain little tricks that you can learn. But the most important thing is just be yourself and be real. There's an acronym I use called AIR. So every story, every post should have AIR. And that stands for authentic, interesting, and relevant. So what you're posting should be real. Now, having said that, you don't have to be too real. You don't have to give every single detail. You're telling a story. So pull out the snippets of what makes it a story, and don't overshare. I think that's one of the worst. I quite often see people doing these posts where they're just overly emoting. We don't need to know all your deep inner secrets. And my test for authentic is, would my significant other or my kids like kick me under the table at a cocktail party if I was telling this? You know, so think about that. Don't be cringeworthy, but be authentic, interesting. That's obvious. Yes, I post a lot about what I do, but I don't post what I do every day because it would be really boring to see a post of me answering emails. So people will sometimes say, well, it looks like you're on a road trip all the time. No, I'm really not. I just take a ton of photos when I'm on road trips and I store up the content because I'm not going to post about something that's boring. And then relevant, it's got to be something people are going to relate to. And it's people that matter to your business. So if you want to attract people in the construction business, or let's say you build for schools in particular, then you want to do posts that are going to appeal to people in the education industry. So think about your audience and make sure you're relevant to who you're trying to connect. So I just tell myself AIR. The other thing is I'm constantly keeping a log. Anytime something happens that's interesting, I'll just pull out my iPhone in the notes, and I've got a folder for ideas, and I just have a rolling list. And so it helps me when it's time to do a post, I'll pull up something I've written on that list.
So I post every day on my business page. So I'm going to take AIR and I'm going to take that.
Yeah.
Because I don't know. I use Pinterest for all my quotes but I do athletes. I do I've been getting into the social side of it, but I'm going to use your AIR thing if that's okay.
That's not it's actually Ted's. And Ted is not giving me a commission on his book, but it's in his book.
Well, I'm going to find it. I'm going to give him the props. And
I should start bringing copies. That would be fun. Because it really helped me a lot.
AIR sounds really cool, you know. And listen, when you guys she's right. You know, you're all construction is very competitive. You're building, you got laborers, it's drywall, it's flooring, it's lighting. You know, you've got to be authentic because in competition, you have to separate yourself from your competitors. And how's that going to be? You've got to sell yourself. But if you're just like, hey, I make the greatest stuff and I can help you on this, versus how how you're really going to help that person and let them know who you are. I think a lot of people buy on who you are versus how great your product is, in my opinion. I mean, listen, I'm a little publisher going up against all these other guys. We had 29 million people hit our site last year. I don't think I'm blown away that people hit that site but we have a ton of content on there. But I basically, same thing Teach does in social media. I look at content before the shutdown. It was just on construction. Now you know what I put up there? I actually have people post how to buy hair extensions because half my circulation is female. How to buy an iPhone. What's the best way to have daycare? I put all sorts of stuff up there, including engineering, construction, architecture. I mean, I get more content than I can deal with. But people reach out to me all over the world, and I get this stuff, and I'm like, I'm going to put this up there. And that's been amazing transformation from the pre-shutdown to now, is just learning that, you just have to throw it out there. Not everything's going to work, but taking the class, like I'm going to start making my TikTok videos. I have my podcast. People are going to laugh at me. I say, look, you guys laugh at me now anyway, so I don't care. But my TikToks are coming. They're coming. So I'm going to be right there with you.
Yeah, and be okay. You're not going to get a ton of likes right away. I went 2 months with getting like 5 likes on TikTok. And TikTok is crazy. TikTok is like, if you get 1 million, that's like a decent number. The numbers are really different. And what turned things around for me on TikTok was I told a story. So it's about storytelling. And I'll tell you the story I told. I was in Rennes, Georgia, where we have our candy plant. And I went to the local diner. We have population 2,900 in Rennes, Georgia, and the center of town is Peggy's Diner. And I was in there one morning, and there's a group of old guys who are the locals, and they get there at 6 a.m. when they open, and they drink coffee for about 3 hours, and they talk about the price of cotton and goats and trucks and whatnot. So I'm in there, I walk in, and I have a Stuckey's hat on, and they look over at me and they say, "Hey, young lady." So like 10 years ago, I would have been, just offended. And, now I'm 50-ish. I was like, "Hi there," totally flattered. And they said, "Well, we bet you work at that Stuckey plant." And I said, "Well, yes, sir, I do." I was not about to say, "Oh, I own the place." I thought that would sound really conceited. So I said, "Oh, yes, sir." And I didn't correct them that they mispronounced our name. And they said, "Well, we bet you get to eat all them pecan log rolls you want." And I said, "Oh, that's the best part of the job." So that was it. It was just like this little snippet. I thought it was interesting and kind of funny. And so like I walk outside Peggy's Diner and I'm like, "Hey, I just want to tell you what happened." I just talk on the iPhone. Next thing I know, I had like 50,000 likes on that little snippet of life. So people like a story. It's just stuff that happens every day. I'm sure there are interesting things that happen on the construction site that you can share.
Oh, I'm sure.
Just remember them when they happen, and maybe even do a quickie video, and just don't be overly concerned about what you look like. I freaked out way too much about how I look like on video, and then you're like, you just got to put yourself out there.
Sure. Any other questions? Because we're just about finished up here. Any one last question?
Any online?
Any online out there? Rich? Anybody on there?
Anyone? I feel like Ferris Bueller.
Yes, I have a question.
There we go. Go ahead.
What is the name of the book that you were talking about with Ted?
Fizz Marketing.
How do you spell that?
Fizz. And there's a subtitle, and I can't remember it. It has something to do with word of mouth and the subtitle. If I give that to you, maybe, maybe I can even just do a little book review or something and share that, and you can put that on your site.
Absolutely.
See, I'm offering to do a little content.
Sure. Absolutely. So with that said, that's going to conduct our Q&A. So let's give Miss Stephanie Stuckey another round of applause for coming in.
Thank you.
And we're at 1:34. So.
Oh, wait, we forgot the best part.
What's that?
There's some Stuckey's treats.
Oh yeah, you know what? I have. We have
brought
Stuckey's
some
for everybody
treats.
after. So when you leave, I'm going to give all those out to you.
Fresh from the candy plant.
Yeah.
I had a friend of mine who has been helping us out. She was at the candy plant yesterday, and she delivered them this morning.
This morning, yeah.
Yeah,
So
they
you're
are
all
as
getting
fresh
those,
as you can get. Yeah.
but you're going to get them when you walk out. And My favorite picture of you on LinkedIn is when you had your hairnet and you were going through the
Yeah.
the pecans and you had one of
Super
your
glamorous.
yeah, no, that was an awesome
Yeah.
picture. So I look, look, I want.
See, all right, so like take photos of you with the construction hat on. People are really interested in how things are built, how things are made. I get more hits, and I'm sorry, I know we're over.
No,
I get more hits from the candy plant. Okay, and yeah, I think it is kind of interesting how you make candy, but it's also interesting how you build a building. So film that. I think I would watch it.
So this is how we're going to do this. It's now 1:35, and I know we were going to do our appointments at 1:35. So this is what everybody out there and everybody in here, what we're going to do is we're just going to add 5 minutes. And we're going to start at 1:40, okay? That'll give us time. And everybody out there, just add 5 minutes to whatever the time slot is on those on the spreadsheet that I sent to you. And we'll stay on time because we got Elvis coming in too here after we get done. And he's going to be awesome. But anyway, once again, let's give her a round of applause. Thank you so much.